Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Crypto Hipster Podcast. This is your host, Jamil Hassan, the Crypto Hipster, where I bring you founders, entrepreneurs, executives, thought leaders, musicians, artists, you name it, all around the world in crypto and blockchain. And today I have an amazing guest. I can go down a list of all the accomplishments and things he started, but I'm going to do this and keep it brief. He's the co-founder of Block. He is the company owner at Next Cipher. He is a founder at Dunvegan Space Systems Inc. His name is Jeff Garzik. He's been around in crypto and blockchain for a long time. Welcome, Jeff.
Hey, Jamil, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
You're very welcome. Very welcome. It's an honor. So, first question to kick things off is this. What is your background, and is it a logical background for what you're doing now?
I'd like to think I always have a very, very logical background, being a logical thinker. Uh, so a micro capsule that I hope you'll forgive me starts at the age of 8, but I started programming at the age of 8. I have made a career of kind of being early. I was on the internet in the late 80s before the web, before everyone else found the internet, back in the dial-up era, the era of internet. I was early into Linux and was fortunate enough to work for 10 years under Linus Torvalds at the core of the Linux system, the Linux kernel, and really honed my software engineering skills there with surrounded by some of the world's greatest developers. You just learn so much from so many great minds over at Linux. And then lightning struck again. I found Satoshi Nakamoto, the inventor of Bitcoin, in July of 2010. And using my Linux skills, I quickly became one of the most prolific early Bitcoin core developers. And that kicked off what we now know as the whole blockchain revolution, crypto revolution, whatever you want to call it. Spawned many competitors and clones and evolutions, and I saw the birth of Ethereum. I saw the ICO craze go up and down, the NFT craze go up and down, the DeFi summer. I've seen multiple market cycles. And that's kind of brought me to where I am today, which is moved over from building software to building companies, building economic systems as a not as I don't like serial entrepreneur. I like maybe multiple entrepreneur, parallel entrepreneur. I wear many hats these days.
Awesome. And we'll talk about some of those entrepreneurial opportunities, but let's start with Next Cipher, right? What is that all about, and how do you empower communities?
Absolutely. Next Cipher is really the marriage of sort of Web 2, old style entertainment, movie making, making of TV shows. It's a video production studio, but it has the critical component of Web 3. So how does that empower communities? How does that change filmmaking, movie making, etc.? Is I argue that it really gets the fans involved in what I love, science fiction, at an earlier stage in the production, gets the fans involved in our productions as we're developing the characters, as we're moving into pre-production, and then starting to film, etc. We'll be able to give fans inside looks at the costumes, the props, the actors as they're being filmed, and then on to post production and hopefully streaming and distribution. The fans again will be able to have first looks. They'll be able to see their input in the earlier stages of these productions. Hey, I voted for that costume to be red instead of blue. Hey, I voted for that to be a laser ray gun rather than a slingshot. in the hero's hands, those sort of things, fans will really have deeper input in at more points in the production cycle. And I think that'll have more invested fans, a more invested community. And putting on my business hat for a second, we can turn around and talk to the people who buy shows, your Netflix, your Amazon, your NBC, ABC, CBS, Universals, and say, look, we have a provable fan base. And that's something that is a bit of a mishmash of crypto and business term. But our competition, to contrast quickly, is going to these show buyers with a screenplay in hand and saying, please finance and produce our production. We're going to those same show buyers saying, we have fans, here's proof. We have engagement, here's proof. And that de-risks the show buying process for them and makes it, at the end of the day, more likely that our shows get produced, streamed, and generate real revenue. So that's a bit of an inside baseball peek, but we really think very deeply and strategically on the business side as to how crypto will empower the community side. So ideally, it's your hopeful win-win type situation where the fans get great products, the fans get involvement earlier in the cycle, have a real impact on production and storyline, characters. And on the business side, we get all the way to streaming. So it's we feel it produces better shows. It's more likely to produce better shows, and it's all about a game of business probability. As I wear my startup CEO hat at the end of the day. So I hope, I believe that the community really does benefit from that type of approach.
I get back to the community, but I want to start with Hollywood, and then come down further. But Hollywood, in my opinion, and a lot of people's opinion, maybe your opinion too, Hollywood needs a reboot, right?
Absolutely.
In many ways. How can we achieve that with Web3 and give everyone the chance, for an Oscar?
You said it. It's Web3, crypto, blockchain is at its core about decentralization, about flattening the hierarchies and the oligarchies, and increasing inclusiveness, increasing access for maybe a budding filmmaker who's not in LA and doesn't have access to Hollywood networks, that their production can bubble up if it's got the quality. That was ultimately the promise of the internet itself, was that everyone's kind of equal from an access standpoint. If you're on the internet, then you can be the next Ernest Hemingway and write the next great novel, and the internet will provide that uplift, access, distribution, etc. And I argue that Hollywood hasn't seen that yet, and that's kind of why it needs a reboot. Is it needs that increase in access for budding filmmakers, budding film producers, so that it's really a competition on story. It's really a competition on quality. It's really a competition on content, character, universe, all the things that matter to us as people who watch shows, people who read books, people who read graphic novels. And there's billions of potential content creators on the planet, and yet it's just so concentrated into LA, a little bit in New York, a little bit in Bollywood, and some of the other international areas that are really exciting. And but the internet promises that peer-to-peer, decentralized, equal access, open access as a default type of approach, and we think that's the right approach. I come from 2 decades in open source. where the default assumption when you enter these open source communities is open access. The default assumption when you enter these communities is kind of a flat hierarchy where there aren't priests in a high tower that bless, one out of a million based on their kind of cigar chomping old boys club gatekeeping. And so open source is about smashing gatekeepers, decentralization, peer-to-peer. Cryptocurrency is about smashing gatekeepers and or creating your own gate in a new place somewhere else, and competing for people to come to your platform rather than the legacy Hollywood platform. So there's a lot of sort of open access, open source, transparency, egalitarianism. I think going on in the crypto community is very positive, very inclusive, and that's a long-winded way to sum up the Reboot Hollywood, I think.
Yeah, I want to go into that a little further. Now I'm dating myself, but I spent most of the mid 1990s going to the independent art house film, theaters, because I had the dream then of being a producer of small independent art house films, right? And then it was the Ritz in New Jersey, but the Ritz in Philadelphia too. They got rid of those theaters and they got rid of a lot of the independent ones. And the only movies that are left going to the box office now are the blockbuster ones, right? So what's the path forward for the independent filmmakers? I know it's decentralization, but what's the path that can, like, the venue that they can build that will compete with these monoliths?
Yeah, I think it's there's kind of two answers to that question, broadly speaking. One is the getting in the door part, which is getting your production financed. As one of my favorite movies harkens back to my dad's days in aerospace, The Right Stuff. And one of the taglines from the movie The Right Stuff is "No bucks, no Buck Rogers," meaning that if there was no NASA funding, then there's going to be no rockets, no moon program, etc. And the same applies to Hollywood productions as well. No bucks, no Buck Rogers. And so independent producers, independent filmmakers, they're at a disadvantage when it comes to getting their own productions financed. And then jumping over to the other bucket for a second, independent producers and filmmakers are also disadvantaged on the distribution side, meaning streaming platforms, movie theaters if they're filmmakers. It's just hard to get your production into one of those catalogs, say into the Netflix catalog or somewhere where you'll start getting a streaming paycheck for streaming videos. Because at the end of the day, you gotta make a profit, or you're not in business. You're not going to make that second production if you don't make a profit on the first production. Just business 101. And so those are the two key challenges: is production financing and production distribution. And I think they have different answers. I think streaming platforms is the second challenge is an easier challenge to tackle. Web3 enables, I think, competing platforms to Netflix, Amazon Prime, etc. I'm already aware of 2 or 3 startups, excuse me, that are going to attempt to compete, and they're offering various tokenomics and other incentives to try and pull independent filmmakers to stream their content on these new and upcoming platforms. So there's additional distribution access points, which is a very positive solution there. And then on the production financing side, that's always the challenge. These TV shows, say a 10-episode season, might cost $20 million, and no matter how much you tokenize that or whatever, it's still an incredible mountain to climb to get $20 million either approved through the Hollywood system or raised through a new cryptocurrency type system. And I think that's the bigger challenge. And there are always going to be more people with scripts to produce than there is money to produce them. So how, I look at economics from a 50,000 foot macroeconomic view. How do you solve that problem? Is you have more producers of content than you have financing. And again, I think uh, unsurprisingly, Web3 potentially offers an answer there as well. So there's, those are the two key challenges that independent producers I think have is access to money and access to distribution, and Web3 can address both.
Sounds good to me. So let's talk a little bit about technicalities then. Um, let's shift to block, right? What is block all about, and what breakthroughs were made possible in further innovation of blockchain applications because of block?
Sure, Block is a blockchain infrastructure company that's been around since 2016. So we've been around the block several times. In the past, among other things, Block built Fidelity's first Bitcoin wallet, Fidelity being a very large asset management company based in Boston, Massachusetts, here in the States. And we primarily would engage the Fortune 50 with either a blockchain strategy on the consulting side or blockchain infrastructure, meaning if you're a nerd and know what these things are, providing nodes, validators, and wallets for public and private blockchain networks. We in the past kind of rode the private blockchain wave up and then right back down. But our heart has always been in public blockchains, i.e., Bitcoin, Ethereum, networks like that, where you really have a fully decentralized referee as a first-class player in the room, that being the Bitcoin consensus or the Ethereum consensus. And so, pretty much exclusively these days, we focus on public blockchain infrastructure. ETH staking nodes, as an example. We provide validators at various cloud providers, often for many of the foundations and projects that, such an example being Algorand, that need validators and infrastructure provided to their communities. So, if you're spinning up a new L1 or an L2, you probably need bulletproof infrastructure for both yourself and to provide to your community. So it's a little bit more on the enterprise sales side of things, but we feel that it provides very valuable underpinnings. Back from my Linux kernel days, we called ourselves plumbers because we often dealt with stuff under the hood that ideally your average consumer should never have to care about. It's just invisible, working in the background, and you're able to send your blockchain transactions, receive your blockchain transactions, and just not think about the experience because it's so seamless.
Yeah, plumbing. I'm doing construction in my house, and when they open up the wall, there's lots of pipes that I had no idea they were there, right? And so I'm like, what do we do with that? They're pretty good. So you know, um, you guys have like you said, you focused on DeFi infrastructure, mining, staking, all that. You said next on your list of things to do or address is communities and storytelling, right? So there's obviously some key lessons you bring from the infrastructure space to the storytelling space. What are these lessons, and what can the industry learn from your successes?
Yeah, I actually truncated the block story a little bit. Apologies to you and your listeners. In addition to infrastructure, we also own several spin outs, including as you just listed, mining, staking, metaverse, 2 DeFi projects, and it's really morphing into kind of Berkshire Hathaway of kind of a big house with several projects inside. And that's fundamentally, I think, a reflection on my personality. I can't build just one thing. I bursting with ideas and the urgency to build this amazing thing and this amazing thing. And fortunately, we have the teams and business models and situation to permit following some of those really strong and promising threads. So but that's Block, and absolutely, storytelling and entertainment has always been literally at the top of my mind my entire life. I've been a science fiction fan my entire life. I love. I'm a Star Wars guy. I'm married to a Star Trek girl, so we're a very nerdy household in general. And and this is relevant to cryptocurrency. One of my in the mid '90s favorite book series to read was based on a tabletop game called Shadowrun. It's kind of like Dungeons and Dragons, but it's cyberpunk. It's set in the future. So, but then there was a novelization of it. That's where I discovered it. And in one of these series, again, this is mid '90s, so many years ago, they described some characters in this fictional setting transacting in what we would call cryptocurrency. One character met another character in a cafe. They handed them what we would call a flash drive, and that was transferring $1 million. And to me, as a teenager reading this novel, I was just blown away. You could hand somebody a tiny object the size of a flash drive, and you just transferred $1 million from your account to their account. And that really was a cornerstone in my mind. And I knew I you know kind of inventing the term later, I put a mental bookmark about that situation in my head. And then 15 to 20 years later, in July of 2010, when I saw a post on slash.org about news for nerds about Bitcoin, the decentralized currency, I knew to pause, drop everything, and immediately dive into the source code. I knew that this was going to be something world changing, if indeed it lived up to its headline and its hype, because I read this science fiction novel, 15 or 20 years ago. And so I keep running into these science fiction stories again and again, both in crypto, in finance, in aerospace with Space Chain and other industry peers. We're all inspired by science fiction, I think in part because, contra to other fiction, it's very forward-looking, it's very pro-positive. It thinks, how would the future be interesting and amazing and change in a really cool way? And people write stories about that. And then we as engineers, we consume that and we build the future. And so science fiction is not just fiction, but maybe a preview of science fact. And that's kind of been a theme of my life. I'm almost 50 years old. And the past 10 years, I have so many mental bookmarks telling myself, man, that's science fiction becoming science fact. Man, that's science fiction becoming science fact. And so it's an amazing world we live in, but we science fiction readers kind of had a preview of the future already. And so I think you're better prepared for the future. You're more future positive. You know how to react when something like, as we record this, AI is stirring up people all over the world. And so I think that to create science fiction, just to kind of wrap up the answer to your question, that's what really inspired Next Cipher, was to give back to the community, to create some some future thoughtful, future positive type content that inspires the next generation of engineers, because that's what inspired me to engineer for the past 20 plus years. And I think that now is the best point to create a fusion of crypto and engineering and entertainment and storytelling, and all of the things in my background kind of came together with Next Cipher.
Awesome. And you mentioned science science fiction becoming science fact, and you mentioned space chain. So let's talk about that. We talked about before the podcast that I did interview Z Zhang about a year and a half ago, early in 2022, and you were a founding member there, and that was great to learn. And since then, Space Chain has launched a second Velas payload in the space station. From the time I talked to him, so how's that experience been, and what were you able to accomplish, and have you held true to Space Chain's mission?
Honestly, it's been absolutely amazing. It's been a dream come true for us. Myself as a fan of space. When I again, it all starts when I was young. My dad would take me to space shuttle launches in Cape Canaveral, Florida, when I was a kid, and that was just so amazing. I would read science fiction, I would watch it on TV, and then I could drive with my family to a literal rocket launch where men were going to space. That really captured the imagination, stuck with me. And as time marched forward, we saw the advent of cloud computing. My career at Linux was very much the career of the situation where the world was figuring out, hey, we could string together millions of super cheap PCs into a thing called cloud. And I wanted to mirror the same thing in space. That was the foundation of Space Chain many years later. Was why in the this would be early 2000s, 2002, 2005. I wanted to mirror what was going on while I was working in cloud computing at Red Hat on Linux in space. I could see that if there was going to be these amazing space stations in space, if there were going to be space settlement, or if, as I think Elon Musk rightly points out, humanity needs a backup plan. As an engineer, that really resonates with me. I like backup plans. It makes sense to have a backup plan. And if a backup plan is, a habitable non-Earth location, then human settlements on other planets, asteroids, moons, then we're going to need data. We're going to need electronics. We're going to need communication. We're going to need networks. And that harkened back again to my experience with Linux, where I was networking together cheap PCs in the early 2000s. And that mirrored in space, networking together cheap satellites and the entire CubeSat revolution. A CubeSat, for listeners that don't know, is a very small satellite, as small as 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters. That's a 1U or 1 unit satellite. And these were changing the economics of space, along with Elon Musk's SpaceX company. Uh, Elon Musk does not get enough credit for giving humanity access to space. Before Elon, there would be one or two rocket launches per year from massive government contractors, and these would cost $1 billion. And that's real money. That's not an exaggeration. And only governments could afford to do that. With what Elon did was he brought down the cost of access to space for everyone, not just big governments. And so it became possible for startups such as Space Chain to spend as little as $200,000 to get our hardware into space. And whereas before, You'd have to be an Iridium or another large satellite manufacturer spending hundreds of millions of dollars to get your hardware into space. And so when you have economic shifts like that, where the cost comes down not just half, but 1/1000th of the cost 10 years ago, that makes so many more businesses possible. It, as quoting Peter Thiel, it creates a 0 to 1 type situation where prior to Elon, startups just it wasn't possible for a startup to access space. There, you just can't go into a room of investors and say, I'm starting this brand new startup. Give me $100 million. That just doesn't work unless one in a billion people. But for a startup to say, I need a couple $100,000 to send a satellite to space, all of a sudden you can have dozens, hundreds, thousands of startups doing that because it's economically feasible for so many. And so this is what's leading the space revolution, is this macroeconomic change, this drastic, exponential reduction in cost to go to space. And those were the two inputs in the space chain. Macroeconomics suddenly made it viable, and the vision that you're absolutely going to need nodes in space. And speaking very, very generally, whether that's just a relay node for Web 2 communications, or we're talking crypto and a blockchain node. As people move out into space, I argue, as a crypto positive guy, a crypto fan, you'll need economic networks, and blockchain nodes automatically provide that out in space. So those were some of the founding ideas in 2014, 2015 when Space Chain was started. Actually, excuse me, 2013 when the idea was originally germinated. And from there, we've managed to launch almost a satellite a year, which is unheard of in the entire space industry. I'm not talking about crypto, the entire space startup industry. Very few startups ever get to space, and we get there almost once a year. So that's just simply a class unto itself in terms of space startups. And so I'm incredibly humbled, honored, and blessed to have been CTO at Space Chain and been part of Space Chain's journey. Ultimately, I think the journey, though, is about multiple jurisdictions, multiple owners, and multiple satellites participating in a single network. That's just how the internet was built, and that's how we feel space and space telecommunications is evolving. And we want, again, the blockchain ethos, that decentralized, peer-to-peer, egalitarian, open access type ethos to continue out into space.
So I guess as a counter-attack vector, or defense vector against oppressive government regimes and rogue agencies that are overstepping their mandates.
Ultimately, absolutely, is the most exciting thing for me personally is there going to be a jurisdiction on Mars that's totally unique? Or is it going to be kind of a flag? Here's the United States jurisdiction. Here's the Russian jurisdiction. Here's the Chinese jurisdiction, all on Mars. I think that's suboptimal. I think that'll be probably a first step, because naturally there's no natural constituency on an empty planet. But the possibilities for giving people a chance to pick a new jurisdiction because they don't like the oppressive regime that they're under, as Balaji Srinivasan calls it, exit, the ability to exit, the right to exit. That absolutely includes space. That absolutely includes putting some assets, we argue, in space. One of the specific businesses that Space Chain offers is known as a third key solution, meaning that there is a key that is only on the satellite, and you have to go, physically fly up into space and crack that satellite open to access that key, making it far more difficult than any solution on Earth. And so some of our customers here on Earth find that service very valuable. And I think that solutions like that will be early entrance into the space business economy as people get plugged into this network. But ultimately, there'll be a internet-like space internet. There'll be an economic component. You'll need to transact payments, and you won't want to, if you're in space and your customer is also in space, you don't want to send the payment back to Earth and then back to space again. You just want to go directly from customer to customer.
A lot of sense to me. So yeah, I see you definitely as a futurist. So so am I. So with so many, from the antiquated traditional mindset against crypto, right? Blockchain and Web3, so many against it, but some in favor of it, of course. How do we work together, right, to achieve a decentralized future and the promise of a shared mission to build a better world than what we have today?
Well, that trends towards philosophy, right? Ultimately, I'm a humanist first, and so trying to reason from first principles. I don't start with a crypto is automatically good position. I start with a pro-human position. Will X or Y or Z benefit humanity? What are the intended and unintended consequence of X or Y or Z? Speaking very generally. And so I think that in that perspective, I often describe crypto as a yin and yang balance with fiat. Some of the crypto proponents will definitely disagree with me here, but philosophically, I believe in balance, counterbalance, and I think that an all fiat system would be incredibly oppressive, and crypto provides a counterbalance to that. Crypto will provide an added freedom for users and for the world at large, just simply existing. And so this might be a little bit of a strange concept, but I argue that you don't have to hold crypto to benefit from crypto's existence. Because if you think about the free market and free market principles and Darwinian free market competition, by simply existing and being what it is as crypto, fiat has to compete harder. It has to work harder. It has to provide more freedom. It has to be more transparent. And as people talk about its flaws and move over to crypto in some portion of their portfolio, that conversation goes back and forth, obviously. But if you take, as I do, the 50-year view, the 100-year view, the very long-term view, ultimately, the question is, does humanity benefit at the end of the day? And I think it does, because of that competitive element, because of that ability to, if fiat, I call Bitcoin, I don't believe it's an inflation hedge, but I do call it hyperinflation insurance. In that, if the fiat system just starts printing money left and right, then there's an alternative sitting right there readily available. So again, that's very much the yin and yang element, the counterbalance element. Being an American, I'm very much indoctrinated in the checks and balances, allegedly, of our judicial, executive, and legislative branches being co-equal branches of government, and that was set up as a check and balance between each other, so that one institution hopefully would not get too powerful. And so crypto similarly is a check and balance in fiat. So I think it's ultimately net win for humanity. But it's incumbent upon us as folks in the crypto industry to build software that pays attention to that human element. I still argue to this day, as I've argued since the year 2010, that the crypto user experience is still rough for the average unsophisticated user, the non-IT expert type of person, and that's got to improve. We need better guardrails, we need better user safety, we need a better user experience, and that's all again in service of that pro-human, humanist type philosophy. So we've got to do better at the same time. So there's this is why I describe crypto as gunpowder sometimes, is that there are good things, amazing things that crypto can bring about, but you can also blow your hand off with this brand new technology. So we're kind of in the we just invented gunpowder phase, and we're figuring out how to handle it safely. And that's crypto, and that's why even to this day, 12 plus years later, I still tell people from a traditional finance standpoint, the granddaddy Garzik PSA is don't go into debt to buy crypto. Don't make it a massive portion of your assets. That just increases volatility risk. That just increases so many risks that you don't need. So be careful, and don't dive in the deep end immediately.
I love the gunpowder analogy. I've self-shot myself a few times. um, awesome. So I love talking to you. This has been a wonderful conversation, and I got to wrap it up. But before I do, I want to ask you one final question, and it's this: how can people find out more information about you, about your companies, about what you do, any of that?
Sure. You can go to block.com, bloq.com, for block, spacechain.com, or for the entertainment, next cipher, cypher.com. We're on the usual socials, primarily Twitter, at Next Cipher Pro for Next Cipher, at Block Inc. Or you can follow me personally. I'm pretty prolific on Twitter at Jay Garzik, though I do warn your audience members that I'm also very high volume and opinionated.
As am I. This has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you very much for your time today. It's been great. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.